My dad owns a casa, which roughly translates into cabin, near the nicer parts of Tijuana. It's out in the middle of the desert, between Tijuana and El Paso, almost outside Tijuana actually. Despite being in Mexico, and we all know the state of public safety in Mexico right now, it's actually a safe area. I do believe my dad pays off protection money to some cartel boss, or is at least on good terms with a higher up, because nobody ever bothered us when vacationing there, even at the height of the Zeta violence spree and kidnappings. I was about 14 when this happened. It was about 2 days since we had come down from San Diego. Dad was drunk on tequila by the pool. Mom was sleeping in that day. So I took out my dirt bike and went riding along the desert. I never went too far, but this time I wanted to try and jump a few dunes that were far away, but still within sight of the casa. Besides, it was also near a neighboring village, and I had a lot of friends there. I had been having fun there for a couple of hours, when I noticed that at the foot of one of the dunes sat an old lady in a white floral dress. Concerned, I went down to check on her, because this was the middle of the desert in the afternoon sun, and no place for a frail abuelita. Abuelita means grandma. So I approached her and called out to her, and she immediately turned to me with the widest grin I ever saw. We chatted for a bit. I just wanted to know if she was okay to be sitting out here in the sun for no reason. But the lady kept dodging my questions and calling me mijo, which means son, and saying how healthy I looked and your usual grandmother nonsense. Since I thought she was senile at this point, I wanted to ride back home. But now Abuelita had hooked her arm through mine and was trying to turn me around in some unspecified direction, telling me she was going to fix me some snacks. Then out of nowhere, I realized little Abuelita here is dragging me towards a shack. Where did the shack come from? I was positive it was not there on the ride in. I'm positive I actually rode through the area where the shack was. So I tried to wrench myself free, but couldn't. I told Abuelita to let me go, to which she kept saying, "Come, come," over and over again in monotone. When we were about 30 feet away from the shack entrance, I was able to pull my arm free and book it to the bike. I ran about 100 feet to where the bike was. I was wondering if this old woman was being paid by the cartel and thinking I would end up in the desert without a liver. I jumped on the dirt bike, and as I turned to look, Abuelita is running at me fast. No, not running, walking at an impossible speed, head held down and cane held in front of her. I mean, when I say fast, I mean fast. I noticed she was making a low hissing noise, so I speed off out of there. When I reached the casa, I decided to turn back, and since I had lost sight of Abuelita, I tried to do a wide circle around the area to see what was what. After all, how is some old Mexican lady going to hope to run after a bike? I was doing a wide circle around the dunes, coming around a curve that would soon show me the shack she tried to drag me to. When the area came into view, the shack had disappeared. Gone. Nada. Desaparecido. Missing. It was not there. Scratching my head, I turn to the side, and I see Abuelita, just dead sprinting in my direction from the desert that was empty just a minute ago. I legged it out of there as fast as I could on my little dirt bike. I was genuinely so afraid I didn't even return to the casa. It was in the same desert after all. I rode all the way down to the villa, to a bar my dad used to frequent, and used the phone to call both my dad and the police. The police never bothered to show. Not that I blame them. A kid calls about a weird old lady in the desert? Who would believe that? My dad shows up 2 hours later, hungover, not to pick me up, but to drink some more. On the bright side, the bouncers, Charuto and Oso, were sympathetic and told me that there are still people in Mexico that believe in las brujas, which means witches. and their occult powers. It was in their culture, and while they couldn't decide whether they'd believe it or not, they explained that there was in fact a local legend about a bruja who had lived out in the desert and would fetch children and teenagers for torture and harvesting their organs. Oso himself said he had seen a lot of weird stuff out in the desert and wilderness, and told me to avoid those areas until I had become a man, for which brujas had no interest in besides trying to seduce. A lot of Mexican people do believe in witches, Satanism, and the occult. Now here in the States, if you tell a story like that, most would just shrug it off, but in Mexico, it's a different story. There's something about Mexico, whether it's the land, the location, or the people, but things are different there.